Hello,
Okie
hello
dokie.
everybody. Thanks for joining. Um, uh, Myself, Mary, and Tom have been talking about this for quite a while, really. It's we've talked about, we always talk about our conditions and us and type one and but yeah, we we realise that we're surrounded by loved ones and people who care for us and people who are our daughters and sons and our parents and grandparents and very often in terms of the diagnosis and the move forwards throughout our lives, we don't tend to think about how the condition affects those around us, be our spouses, be our children, blah, de blah, de blah, as I mentioned. Um, and I thought it, particularly after speaking to Victoria over the weeks and months about Lucy and her experiences as a parent, I thought it was really important that we kind of, particularly selfishly from my own point of view, to get an understanding, a viewpoint of what happens in terms of other people's kind of understandings and experiences. So, hence getting everybody on the panel today to start to kick some discussion about the condition and the people living with the condition. That is us as type ones, and it's also our families. So
Yeah, it affects
yeah,
everybody, Tony, doesn't it? Like, and it affects everybody differently, and it
well,
affects us differently
and you're
depending on
quite
when we were diagnosed.
unique, aren't you, Mary? Because obviously you've not only got the experience of living with the condition yourself, but you're a parent of Johnny who's also got that condition, and so you've got a very unique, and I think you the ideal person to be co-hosting with, because you can talk about both sides of the same coin. Really, it's that's a crucial thing.
It's
It's
true, and like I'm still only like a tiny little kind of set of glasses as well, because when I was diagnosed was different to how old Johnny was when he was diagnosed. So we're like I was 18 and Johnny was 6, and you were young when you were diagnosed, Tony. So the like we all have different experiences of it, and then those around us have different experiences of our type 1 with their lives too, because it depends on what stage of life we're at and how we need others
yeah,
as well, and how it is with us too, because all, all going through our questions and things like in preparation for tonight, like it made me think of lots of things like positive and negative, and how fortunate Johnny and I are. Like, and sometimes you just don't think sometimes that you're fortunate, and
yeah.
but we really are. Yeah.
We've got
So
we've got um, we've got some we've got a chat with Ian later on that we'll play, and obviously you've talking to him offline. He can't do tonight, but it was listening to that earlier on. It was really quite an emotional thing hearing from him as obviously brother to Kirsty, and how he
honestly, Kirsty, it
and
was eye opening for me
yeah, it really
in
was.
many
It
ways.
was, yeah. We've got Sheila as well, Ian's partner, and Mrs. Fox, Maggie, who's obviously Mrs. Fox. Um, we got Victoria, who's my brummy mate, and she's mother of Lucy. Lucy's 5 years in, is she?
Yeah, that's right. She
Okay,
was diagnosed at 8 and she's now 12, nearly 13.
okay. So
Hello.
yeah, so that's be interesting to talk to. So obviously, Mary, be interesting to see what parallels you and Victoria have as a parent of a type one, and
Yeah,
what
looking forward to
similarities, what
chatting,
differences, and
Victoria.
stuff.
Yeah.
I know that Victoria's done some done some kind of or has been speaking to, is it Breakthrough, about the kind of parental stuff with schools and
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Well, it's just sort of volunteering. So obviously, I suppose I was a bit of a weird position with Lucy, because when she was diagnosed, I was actually working in the school that she was at school. So I was sort of in the SEN team there. So she was the first type 1 in the school since I think the head had been there. And then not long after Lucy, there were 2 more children diagnosed. So there were 3. So of course, then you're sort of clinging on, because obviously I worked in the SEN team at the time. So effectively, Lucy came under my sort of umbrella, and it was sort of rooting around for resources that were useful for school. For me as a parent, making sure that school had everything they could possibly need to be informed. And obviously then just seeking out anything you can, and obviously Breakthrough, which was at the time they'd been really important to us, because when we were diagnosed, when Lucy was diagnosed, she was in hospital for a week, but the things that really made a massive difference to us was the bear, Rufus, that they get. That was like that little parcel with him in it, and then there was some books. Literally were like it was just so important to us at the time that I had a real affinity then with that charity, because I felt like they were the only ones that I can remember really at that time that really gave me a bit of comfort. So leading on from that, obviously I went to look at their resources to make sure school had those and to see what was available. And then since then, obviously speaking with Tony about, I'm quite keen to do some sort of volunteering that would be helpful, and he'd suggested contacting Breakthrough Type 1, and they offered me loads of different types of things that I could do. So I've signed up for a few, but one was to be on the panel to look at the current resource package that goes out to schools and to sort of review that. And that was really interesting, because I don't work at a school anymore, but I still have colleagues within that sort of sector that do and work as Senkos and assistant Senkos. So it was really, really interesting for me because it's changed slightly since Lucy's diagnosis even. And I did send it on to my old colleague at the current Senko there, because I thought the resources were really, really good. Because I sort of learned that when I was working in school, I know we'll talk about that probably later, but one main concern when Lucy was diagnosed was like, how is this going to work in school? And I think as a parent, it's quite daunting anyway, but I think because I've worked in a school and knew how they're not set up for anything different than the average student. They're not set up for any additional need, really. So it's all very well like having this care plan from hospital, but I was like, well, how's that actually physically going to work with things like assembly or break time, or they've got times in there, but they don't fit in with Lucy's school day. So like, I was very aware of that because I worked in the school and her school, but I sort of think, God, if you didn't do that, then you'd be clueless really about where to even begin about getting them back into school. So yeah, the resource pack that they asked me to review and to look at and things and just give some feedback on was really interesting for me, because I sort of, when I was working at the school where Lucy was, I'd sort of like done an idiot's guide. So I'd sort of done it was almost like a colour chart for teachers to have that were involved with Lucy in their classroom. It would say, if she's this, do this, if she's that, do that. And it was really detailed, but visual.
I had a traffic light chart.
Yeah, exactly like that. Yeah.
Tom, is there anything, because it sounds as though there could be a lot of crossover with the work
Diabetes.
that you guys
Digibet
do.
Digibet does have resources for, and Digibet are partners with Breakthrough T1D on the schools module.
Okay.
Is that what you assessed, Victoria?
No, it was specifically the Breakthrough Type 1 resource pack that gets sent to schools that you can request. It's like a little pack,
a little paper pack,
paper
folder.
And it was much more detailed than the one that was available when Lucy was diagnosed. So actually I was thinking, if this had been sent when she was diagnosed, I wouldn't have had to have done like a DIY like guide for like just a visual, because I think when you're busy in the classroom, you just need to look and think, oh God, she's beeping. Oh, well, we need to do that. And then it's straightforward. That's what I was trying to sort of create. So it's an awful thing to say, but just to make her less of not a problem, but to make it easier for them to not be scared, basically.
That this happens in other schools all the time. And
Yeah.
like I've seen the pack, like as I used to work Breakthrough T1D, and
Yeah.
the pack is great, and the module,
Yeah.
like the modules that the staff learn from, has changed, and it's been updated with
Is it
co-produced with them.
is it consistent across, you know, all authorities and private and public schools? Is it a consistent approach, or does it tend to be, you know, you're lucky if you happen to be in a good school with good sport?
No,
I,
it's not consistent.
No, no, it's not consistent. Exactly, I would completely agree. And no, it's not consistent. And it's when you get into like the nitty gritty of it in school, it's very much that, you know, it's to the point where, so for example, Lucy, when she first went back to school, she wasn't injecting herself because she just couldn't do that. She just couldn't do it. So it's then sending her, so she's been basically off school for a week. Then she's got to go back to school as having this now. And at the time she hadn't been given a Dexicon straight away, so we were finger pricking. But so you're sort of then asking school to finger prick and inject, and then but with just quite minimum training. And that's not a criticism at all of our team, but it's just obviously very restricted with their time and things. So you're then asking members of staff who've probably never come across this, never injected anybody, never done anything like that, might not want to, that are then being asked to do something. And actually they can refuse as staff. You can, I mean, obviously Lucy has got rights, but they also can say, I don't want to do that. And I think as much as then, you know, I'm not saying that they would be bullied into doing that at school, but actually, if you are then putting that pressure on a member of staff to do something that they don't want to do, as a parent, do I want that member of staff looking after my daughter anyway? Because obviously they're reluctant and they're being put in quite a difficult position. So it's very individual on the school and the kind of staff and the kind of support, and it comes from the top and the SLT really, what their senior leadership team, what they're, you know, how supportive they are. And I mean, I worked at school, which was good in some ways, but was a little bit detrimental in others, because obviously I was making sure I wasn't on Lucy's rota for checks and injections and things like that, because I felt that she needed that independence from me. And obviously I'm you know, I didn't want to do that for her. But then also everyone knew I was there, so always had that to sort of fall back on. But what I would say about the school that Lucy was in when she was first diagnosed was that because I worked there, I had some really good colleagues that just literally just flew with it and were very supportive. And we were really, really lucky, because I think that really helped Lucy accept it and just crack on. Whereas my main concern then, from obviously being quite settled there, she was settled in a lot of ways, but the way they had to manage Lucy, say for her lunchtime, for example, she'd be going to sit in a lunch club because it was easier for the staff to manage it that way. So they would inject her, she would then eat her lunch, and then she'd go out to play. But that meant she was then going out to play when all her peers in her year group were coming in for their lunch. So she started struggling mentally a lot with that, because she was quite isolated. And then so she had that going on. And then obviously then we go to the transition into secondary school, which is then another thing, because they have this expectation in secondary where even if they understand it and you've got a care plan and everything else, there's this, I don't know if you found this, Mary, but I feel like you felt very much that they just needed to be independent at that point. You know, you get a bit, we're lucky where she is, she does get a lot of input because as a school nurse, but it is very much the shift.
Yeah, in secondary school, they just have to, because not
Yeah.
every school has a nurse.
No,
and
exactly.
Ours don't as well. And you know what, Victoria, I know that like this conversation about like the educational field is something I'd actually really appreciate if we could do, maybe as a whole chat by itself, because there's all the stages of education, and I've gone back to third level myself, and I'm a PhD student now, and what those students have coming out of secondary, like depending when you're diagnosed, you don't even know what you need to ask for support wise.
No, and it's whether you can. I mean, Lucy's very, very shy, and going into year 7, she knew that if she was going, what they'd asked her to do is if she was going high or low, they did not want her treating herself within the classroom, for example. So she then not only has got to get used to being in a classroom with people she doesn't know, she's then being asked to then, you're going to have to put your hand up and say, can I leave the classroom? She's got her
asking permission to have
Yeah,
a medical
leave.
emergency.
Yeah,
that's
she's got a phone. They ask for her phone to be out on a desk. So of course, then you're in secondary school, and all the other children are like, "Oh, why she's got a phone?" And then she had it where, you know, staff were told about Lucy in the inset and all that stuff. And I did say to my husband at the time, I said that there will be teachers that will challenge Lucy about her phone, even though they will have been in that inset and they will have heard it and they should have been listening, but they will forget. And she's had that a couple of times where they've not discreetly come up to her and said, can I just ask you why you've got your phone out, which she hates anyway. They've asked over the class. So not only has she then got to, and she is painfully shy, speak up, she's also then having to disclose her medical information that's personal to a whole group of people that she's only just met and gone into year 7 with. And so it's like the mental load of that, as well as starting year 7. But yeah, I agree, education in this is a massive thing to discuss.
The
I
whole
completely agree.
conversation. I'm
Yeah.
just thinking about that. We haven't even introduced. Have we had Sheila and Maggie talking yet? And
no.
I just swear. Sorry,
I'm going to
sorry,
mute
Victoria.
myself. I'm going to mute myself.
It was interesting. It
I
was
could
interesting.
totally talk about this all night.
Yeah, it was interesting, some of the stuff you were saying there, that myself and Maggie, our daughter's, she's nut allergic, and so we had a similar thing with the care package with schools. But very often, you know, there'd be times when there'd be things happen, like kids would be eating, you know, almond cakes or whatever in class, and there wasn't that awareness because the staff have 1,000,000,001 other things to do, and it's little things like that, you know, that came to, as a parent, made us realise that it is sometimes it's less than ideal, and that's at the best of times. Sometimes, you know, there was other stuff going on, and it's really difficult, wasn't there, Mrs. Fox?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Hello.
Hey, Maggie.
I managed to make the technology work. I was just going to comment, Victoria, because I kind of have, listening to that, there's kind of 2 hats I'm putting on. Is one, I'm an HR director, and so know the law quite well, but also I'm for the last 14 years, I've been the safeguarding behaviour governor at Madeline's old junior school. And I think it's really interesting because listening, I can relate to everything you say about the difference between, you know, primary education and secondary education. But I would absolutely keep a note of any time that something happens and that she's questioned, or even if the way she's talking, because actually they're breaking the law, because it's discrimination, because you're protected under the Equality Act. Because diabetes comes under the Equality Act. So yeah, you know, rather, I'm not saying go into battle, but it is almost certainly worth going and sitting down and saying, I want an appointment, you know, and I don't want just a half an hour, I want an hour, and I'm going to talk you through, because actually, you know, you're doing this and I want to help you, and I want to be able to help my daughter plus other students who you'll have.
Lovely framing of it.
You know, when you start sort of firing some of the things about that it's a protected characteristic under the Equality Act, you know, they certainly, I mean, certainly if I had a parent saying that, and it, because the head would say to me, I'd every alarm bell in my head would be going off. But our primary, it's interesting because the junior school that I'm governor, we've got one child currently. We've had 2 in the past who were type 1, and this little lad's on a pump, and actually, I mean, I'm very lucky. It's a good school, I would say that, wouldn't I, because I'm governor. But they have sent one of their members of staff on a specialist course to learn what needs to happen and what doesn't, and then they on one of the inset days they did a whole bit about it. But it's a small junior school, you know, there's 300 odd kids, so that's a lot easier. Secondary is a nightmare for so many things, and without being sexist, it's also absolutely horrendous for girls in year 7 and year 8. We've been there. And so all this is doing is compounding it, and I certainly wouldn't take it sitting down, if need be, asked to see the governors, find out who the safeguarding behaviour governor is, and Sorry, I'm now starting a war now against
No.
We're all scribbling down notes, Maggie.
I mean, it's been one particular teacher, but it was nipped in the bud quite quickly. But I am gunning for her every time I go to parents' evening. And Lucy dies. She dies when I go and sit with this teacher because she knows.
Yeah. But I get that. Madeline, when she was younger, she had hearing loss for quite some years, and unfortunately, it wasn't glue ear or grommets or anything. And they didn't think she'd ever get. She'd had so many ear infections. We were told that her hearing was permanently damaged, and she'd gone to our Catholic school where we go to church, and the teacher didn't. There was literally no allowances made, and we took her away because I complained. And I complained formally, and I mean, we went into battle so many times, but to the point where it's upsetting her and me, and I just said, this is ridiculous. I need to move her.
Looking at the emotional aspects of that, some of the things you said, Victoria, about how Lucy would cringe at the attention. I can remember that very, very, very clearly in school. You've got this thing which makes you different, and all of a sudden, as soon as there's attention, and very often what you, in terms of emotional support, and obviously we'll start to include emotional support, some of the questions we've got out to Maggie and Sheila, and how do you support? I mean, how have you supported her in balancing that, having to look after her but having to make her independent?
I think with Lucy, I've thought a lot about this when I was looking at the questions, and I think I don't know if it's just her nature, but I think because she was 8, which I know isn't really young, but obviously she's still little. She has amazed us really that she hasn't really ever sort of battled it at all. So when I say that, I mean, when she was diagnosed, she just accepted, this is what you've got, this is what we're going to need to do from now on. She didn't ever say she wasn't going to have the injections or, rebel against it in any way. She's always just accepted it, which in some ways is good. But then in some ways I sort of feel that the fact that she doesn't question it or say, why have I got this, or rebel against it, is also she sort of doesn't really say anything about it. But I suppose in terms of supporting her, I mean, we obviously get we get our team that we are under, which is Heartlands and Solihull. She gets a nutritionist attached to her. She has really good DSNs. She's then got a clinical psychologist that she can tap into. And to start with, she was getting a little bit just anxious, maybe a year in, and we sort of thought it could be to do with the diabetes, but we weren't really sure because she couldn't really articulate it. But she did spend some time with a psychologist, and I don't know if that helped her or not, but we did that. But in terms of supporting her, I suppose we always make her hopefully feel that she can always talk about it with us. We don't not talk about it, but we don't talk about it all the time. It doesn't, it just definitely doesn't sort of define her personality wise. She's always just got on with it, and I don't know if that's going to at some point explode or something as she's going into her teenage years, because she's now nearly, literally 13 on Sunday. But I think what has made a massive impact for all of us, but probably mainly for Lucy, obviously, is the technology that she's now got. So she didn't want to go on the pump for a really long time, but made the decision to do that last summer, and just before going to secondary, actually. So there's a lot of change going on, but it is literally, I don't think, I was talking to her about it today. I said, did you think that it would make such a difference that it has? And I don't think she understood how much independence it would give her. So I suppose we support her in terms of, you can talk to us about it, we mention it, obviously, even when we're doing carbs for dinner, or have you done, I'll literally just say to her, have you done your carbs? And then I just trust her with it now. She just does it, and she does it, she knows what she's doing. So supporting her in that way. But obviously we just genuinely have never made a big deal about it. And I think as soon as she was diagnosed, I think we both knew that we could get our heads around the medical side, and it, obviously that's a lot, but our like main concern has always been her mental health and like how she's feeling about it and things. And I honestly don't know if it's because she's been diagnosed so young that she literally has no memory, or she says she does, but not really, of life before it. And I know you could look at that as a positive or a negative, but I think for her it's probably been a positive.
Mary,
if that makes sense.
is that similar? Is that a similar story to Johnny?
Yes, but I have actually got thoughts on it, and it's based on my brother's child who had cancer when he was 3, and my sister-in-law at the time. And I remember just before, I'm actually a bit wobbly even thinking about it. Like just after Johnny was diagnosed, I remember she said to me, like she said, because my nephew was all of those things that Victoria described Lucy as, and how Johnny was as well. And my sister-in-law, she put it this way. She said, "They're like that because of you. Like you are you are their castle, and how you are is how they are." And
That's making me
I was
emotional saying that, because I would never say that about myself, but yeah.
and like I was at an event there a couple of weeks ago, and there was a psychologist at it, and she said, and it just made my back curl, because it just was what it is. She was like, I have more worry for the parents, because they are surrounding themselves around this child, and they are the strength, and when they don't falter, their child doesn't falter, but they carry the weight. Like they're the bit below the waterline, like that holds all the emotional and worry and finds it all out. And if they don't have the answer, they will find that answer. And that was me.
I've said that about. I've said the same about. I was 10 when I was diagnosed, and I don't remember kind of anything before that. Really, it must be the age. Like with Lucy and with Johnny, with me, it was literally, I was in hospital and they showed me these things and it was to do, and that was it. You don't, at that age, you're kind of fairly flexible and malleable, and so you just kind of crack on with it. And I've said probably to both of you that I'd never had that discussion about for my parents, what my parents went through. I've never thought about it, and I've never we've never discussed it. And it's strange. Maybe it's the emotional self, just as the type 1, just kind of hunkering down and getting on with it. And these adults are these professionals are telling you to do stuff, and so you just do it because they are the experts and stuff. So yeah, it's interesting.
And it's natural, I think, as well. Like as a parent, Victoria, when it's not in your body, to think that the hard part of type 1 diabetes is having it, and having it is one part of it, but managing it and managing the challenges of it and managing the failures of tech, not our failures, the failures of technology. They're all bits you do as a parent that you carry for your child until they can take it. But like they're the things that we do, Tony and Kirsty, and like that we do by ourselves, or to a great extent that those looking on, like you, Maggie, like that you see, where you can help with, or you see our frustrations and can't help us, and you carry other parts of it, like like they're things that we carry.
Sheila and Maggie, bringing you in, because I know you've said it so many times to me about going, you wish you could kind of understand, and you wish you kind of could go through that with me, and so what do you both think about your relationships? Is it the support? Is it always it's worse for me because I don't understand? Is that a similar kind of thing?
I don't feel like I don't feel like that. I think for me I guess the biggest education for me, and obviously, we've been married 22 and a half years, and but together 24 years, and the technology and everything that's changed. I mean, when we were first together, you had a vial and a syringe and everything. So I think there's sort of the physical stuff in terms of the tech, but I think the thing that I see in you in particular is the emotional bit, and I think that was my biggest learning curve. In that it is never something you can switch off, ever. And I don't think, I didn't know that, and I certainly would always try and talk about it now to people who maybe want to know about it, that this isn't something you can ever forget. There's a constant routine, there's a constant, it's in your mind. I've seen you when you're really hungry but you can't eat, or you really don't want to eat but you need to eat, and I think that the psychological impact, and I guess I've started to see more support around that, just in the things that you've said, and in terms of ITAD and PARTHA and all of those things. But I don't see the NHS, I don't see or hear that from when you come back from your DSNs. And I think that is the biggest thing that I had to learn, really. I mean, I do remember the first time you had a bad hypo, but I had no idea what was going on. And I made the mistake of trying to shove sugar in you, which was a huge mistake because it just went absolutely everywhere. And that wasn't good. But I needed to learn. I didn't know any of those things, and my knowledge was incredibly low. And it's great because you taught me what I needed to do in those practical situations. But I do think the emotional side is under-resourced, and I think it's underestimated. And I don't mean on me, I mean on the person who has type 1, not on me in the slightest.
Yeah, it's interesting, Victoria, you mentioned the clinical psychologist at Heartlands and Solihull. That's really interesting. I know that I had a couple of sessions probably pre-COVID because I was struggling with burnout, really struggling, and a couple of sessions, but then they kind of either lost funding or somebody went on to other things, and I wasn't aware of the clinical psychologist. So that's something that I need to maybe have I mean, in terms of burnout and stuff, that's part of the same. That's part of the same jigsaw, isn't it? It's that psychological as well as physical that we don't get supported, really.
Yeah.
I mean, Sheila, have you got any? I mean, how do you kind of handle the emotional support side of things, and do you feel as though you have to be proactive or not, or can you? It's just it's really interesting, your relationship.
Yeah, it's been really interesting listening to Victoria and others, and Mary on that parental side of things, because of course it's just so different to what it would have been for my husband when he was a wee boy, because of course there was no support. Actually, in those days it wasn't even finger pricking. He would still have been doing the wee urine test and so on. So I mean, teachers wouldn't have known anything about it at school and didn't know anything about it at school. No friends would have known about it at school. There was no support mechanism at all. And it was very, very strict in terms of weighing of food, and the food that you could and couldn't have, because in those days some people might have heard of the red and the black line, and you could have so many foods from the black line, and you could have very, very, very few, if any, from the red line, which was most of the carbohydrates. And absolutely everything was weighed to the microgram before you then took any insulin. So it was a very, very different environment, and just kind of had to get on with it, I suppose. And then you come along in later life and you meet your partner, and I didn't know anything about type 1. I hadn't known anybody before with type 1, so I just had to learn along the way. And I think for me, I think as being there, it's very much just about being there as the support act. It absolutely, all the 24/7 is very much with Ian, and I'm there just to support when I can, to help to pick up on the not so good days and to be around on the good days, but not to take over in any way. So I think for me, it's always been just about being there to support in any way I can, and to increase my own understanding over the years as much as I can.
A question to both you and Maggie. Has there been times when the things haven't been going as well, that you've ever felt that you kind of need to perhaps get a little bit more involved, ask the questions, or is, if for instance, I know there's been times when my control has been not so great, and I've not really, how frustrating sometimes is that, or is it just a case of you always know best, you're the one with the condition?
So I think it depends on each individual. It's very different for everybody. And I think what's really important, or it has certainly been for me in the partner scenario, is having those kind of really honest conversations at the start. And as we've developed our relationship over the years, been married for quite a few years now, to get that understanding of what is needed. So for some people, they might want very direct input and support. For others, it definitely isn't. But I think what's really important is having the conversation to find out what it is that your partner does want from you, because it's up to them to say. So I don't think it's for me to, as it were, I don't like the word enforce, but to put anything on, even if I can see that there are things and I think, oh, maybe that has to just come through in how I can just quietly support from the background. So I'm very much supporting from the wings rather than from the stage.
I absolutely agree, and I think, I can tell now the sorts of, you very rarely have, full blown hypos. Your control is excellent, but I can kind of tell when you're having a stubborn one and it's just not going to happen, or when it's one that it's just too much. And then, I've learned to say, can I help? Can I, what can I do? What can I? And I can usually tell by your reaction, but 99% of the time, I'll just lift the mood slightly by saying, when we got married, the night of our wedding, I woke up in the night to find Tony on the floor scrabbling through a bag. And I said, what are you doing? And he said, my blood sugar's dropped. So I got out of bed in the hotel and found, I think there was some sugar or some biscuits or something. And I said, right, eat those. And I phoned reception and said, I need, some more biscuits or sugar or whatever I asked for. And the guy came in, the night porter knocked at the door, and he looked like Lurch, which was fairly disconcerting. And sort of handed me these things at a distance and said, does he need an ambulance? I said, no, he's fine. And I gave him, now bear in mind, we literally just got married and promised, in sickness and health, and had a lovely Catholic wedding because we're Catholic and all of these things. I gave him the biscuits and I got back into bed, closed my eyes, and then I couldn't hear him eating. So I was half asleep saying, I can't hear you munching. I can't hear you munching. But there was absolutely no care whatsoever. It was just, oh, we're married now. Come on, eat your biscuits.
I need to add in our wedding night. So I was the opposite. I was high as a kite, and we were in like a coach house for our wedding, and it had single glazed windows, and it was pretty cool. And because I was so high, I was quite warm. So Adrian just snuggled up to me. Not so much as a care stuff.
No, that's it. I was exactly the same.
Once the ring goes on the finger, that's it. all the care
I have
goes out the window.
I have a
I'm
question
heartless.
actually for Maggie and Sheila. What you had, something you'd said earlier, Maggie, that made me just write it down. Like, and but you know the way, Tony, the way we kind of manage, we try and we always try to manage our emotional well-being, like by suppressing like a lot of stuff, just because there's not much out there, and you just have to get on with it, because you still have to get up and go to work and do all of those things. So if you got too stuck in the weeds, would you even leave your room sometimes? But Maggie, like Sheila, have you noticed, that suppression, how we manage
Oh yeah,
our mental health? Just
yeah.
that like what does it look like as an onlooker?
I think I mean it's like marriage counselling. I think we're quite lucky in that, you know, we've always talked about things. And well, I mean, I think Tony's not had any choice, to be honest. I've always talked about stuff. But I think also, you know, after Madeline was born, I really wasn't very well at all, and there were quite a number of, you know, years that then had an impact. And I mean, I was very seriously ill, and you know, Tony thought, without going into a lot of detail, that he was going to be a single father with a week-old child, because, you know, I was that ill. So then afterwards, and I had postnatal depression, they kept telling me that it was because of this, that, and the other, which it wasn't. I think that he suppressed a lot because he felt guilty and he needed to be the strong one, when actually, once we sort of come through it, I remember none of it whatsoever, because I was unconscious for the entire thing. So it's like I know what happened, but it was like it happened to someone else, whereas he had to witness it and go through all of that. And so I think that there kind of has been a suppression, and I think both of us probably do it. You know, there's the good old Catholic guilt in that, oh gosh, we shouldn't really focus too much, but I think we've also got the point where we can lift our heads and wave a red flag and say, do you know what, I'm struggling. And sometimes that struggling doesn't mean you want to talk about it, because I can still have it. I mean, my you know, when I went through menopause was horrendous, you know, on my mental health, which I wasn't remotely prepared for. And sometimes I wanted to say, look, I'm struggling, but I haven't got the energy to talk about it. So it would be all right, but I just need to tell you I'm in this space. And so we kind of have learned that there are different ways. Sometimes that struggling, you need intervention. And that can take the form of, you know, a conversation that actually, no, you need to come to the doctor with me because I need some help, or it could be just a hug, or it could be just actually right now, I'm just telling you, you know, great Irish expression, you know, I'm not able for it. And actually you don't want to go any further, but that's it. So I think, you know, I think it can take the form of so many, you know, things, and it's, you know, it's a roller coaster, isn't it? You know, there's always something,
and you're sharing it.
Like,
doesn't it? It does bring you together. Like it's not just about type 1. It's about like everybody's thing. Sheila, do you see that in your family too?
Yeah, I think it's one of the things that I said in the recording that I did with Claire last week. That I think it's actually brought us closer together as a couple, which I actually think is a real privilege in many ways. Which I don't think would have been the same without it. But I think for us, it's actually just been, you know, Ian had a good career. I've had a really good career. We've always been really active in lots of other things in life, and you kind of see what other people are going through, which helps to put it in perspective and so on. So it's been about sort of, I think, putting it into perspective for us in some ways, recognizing that there's always other things going on in our life or other people's lives, being it looking after elderly parents or whatever it might be, or other traumas that you're helping to deal with for other friends. So it's kind of always just been in its space in some ways, but I do think it's brought us closer together. Yes, I would definitely say that. I think without a doubt, because you have to know each other really, really well. So you have to know when you can actually come in and help, and when actually it's quite frustrating possibly, but you just have to back off. So you've got to know each other really well.
I think one of the things that I've seen in Tony, and probably, you know, massively so because of being part of, you know, the diabetes chat, that he has far more open about being type 1 and what that means. And you know, one of my closest friends, her son was suddenly diagnosed type 1, completely unexpectedly. He's in his 20s, and they were both completely thrown for a loop. And you know, he actually you know, he almost hero worships Tony now, because you know, Tony has spent time talking to him, explaining to him. You know, it is that thing about, you can have the conversations I would expect. I mean, I'm not obviously there, but with medical professionals, and it's really quite clinical. But actually, to talk to someone where you've got that shared condition, because I can't imagine, because I haven't got it, and it would be incredibly patronizing of me to assume, you know, what it feels like. But I think, you know, I see the help and the education and the community, and I think that has, I think, you know, as an observer, I think it's massively helped. I mean, I'm talking for him now. He might come on and say, actually, no, it's a load of rubbish, but that's just, you know, I think that's really important.
I think out of everything over the past 10 or so years, peer support has just been the difference between having to battle on or having to thrive. And you know, it's really, I've told you all of you so many times that I'm just incredibly proud to be a small part of this. It's wonderful community. I think there's something which ties us all together, but it doesn't make us kind of anything less than individual. And that's the thing that I've got. And the whole thing about Joe, the hero worship, makes me really quite embarrassed, because all I'm doing is just helping him out with some of the aspects that I know almost certainly he's not getting answered by healthcare professionals. A lot of those soft things that we all have to deal with, a lot of the emotional stuff that you won't ever get in clinic, and that's, you know, and that's where our peer community is so valuable. You know, we will never talk about, you know, do I increase by 1 or 2 units or do I decrease? None of that minutiae. It's all about the bigger stuff. It's all about the bigger picture. How do you feel? How do you do? How do you cope with? You know, what happens when you do this? What happens when you? That's the most amazing thing that is, you know.
But
and
you know, Tony, the perspective though that Maggie has on Joe, and how she can't support that the way how we support each other in peer support. Like, this is 100%. How it looks like from Maggie's perspective, because it's impossible for her to say those kinds of things that you can just say.
Yeah, and I think for all of you, that's my biggest observation is, you know, it's, and I think also for being, and I'm going to be really sexist now, I think for blokes that it's not always as easy to open up. It's lovely that, you know, more men are, and I think that's brilliant. And I think, you know, I see that Tony's not been afraid to show his vulnerabilities, in the hope of encouraging that someone else might say, actually, do you know what, I feel like that, I feel crap as well.
Okay,
but I do think, that peer support just seems to me to be way above, as his wife, anything that I could do, and I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah, agreed. I think the peer support is just so valuable, and for someone who hasn't been around except for the last couple of years, and it's that sharing of knowledge as well. And I do think it's a very special community. I can't think of any other condition or anything where one would get the same type of community. I do think type 1 diabetes community is a very particular community, and it's a very caring, sharing community, and a very special one to become involved in.
Yeah, and I know we're biased, like, but I'd love to see other communities like us, because it is like that. Like I think about this a lot, Sheila, actually, and I know that ours, a lot of the lessons were learned from the HIV community, and it's an invisible community that's stigmatized, that wants to get on, that has to do things that they don't necessarily have access to, and everybody's helping each other. But I don't know if it's as rich and as positive as what we have, and different. But I'd love to hear other ones.
I think it's interesting because work in my work, the thing that's become the big thing is obviously about menopause and all of that's a massive. I mean, it's become an almost tick list, which is just drives me mental because it's well, we're going to do something because we've got to do something. But actually, I don't see that as the same. And I mean, I've introduced and companies I've worked at, we've done a lot of work in the menopause space, but I don't see that. I see that almost as forced. It's not natural. Whereas this, and I've been to, well, I haven't been to TAD, but I've been to when Tony's gone away. I've jumped on the bandwagon and then come in the evening and met up with some of you and had a lovely time. And I absolutely love that because for me it seems you've got the formal stuff and the workshops and the talks and all of that, but you've then also got that wonderful almost informal community in the evening. And actually
like
I think
extended family.
Yes.
Second cousins. It's a load of meeting.
Yeah, it's a load of friends. I mean, you are. I've got so many friends in the community that, and I've said it before. It's about very often diabetes is the last thing we speak about, isn't it? Of an evening at TAD and stuff like that. It's just and that's just golden. It is. It's it's about the support networks.
But do you not think it also normalizes? I mean, I remember the first evening I came and we sat in whatever that place was called in Liverpool, in the very posh place, with the fancy loos, and everyone was eating, and because there was food, there were a number of people obviously getting out pumps or depending what technology they were on, some form of testing or whatever it was, and there was it was just normal, completely normal. There was no batting an eyelid from anybody. There was no having to explain why you were doing it. What are you doing at the table? None of that. And to me, I mean, I can still visualize it. I mean, I was sat with a very nice couple who I'm afraid I can't remember names because I'm fairly useless, but who were lovely. And there was, I just thought, this is amazing. I'm literally surrounded by people who I don't really know, but there just is no one's asking any questions. It's just all getting on with it and it's normal. And how fabulous is that?
I've got a question for Victoria. Like, is it okay if I like bring as a parent, like, and peer support for parents? What support have you got, Victoria, or has Lucy got, or?
Yeah, do you know, I was just listening to that, and I'm listening to that thinking, I really hope Lucy has that as she goes into like adult, the adult side of it. But in terms of her, like what we get and her, it's pretty much nothing really. There's when she was first diagnosed, I was literally searching for absolutely anything I could find. And there's 2 groups on Facebook which are parent groups. That people go on and obviously say that their child's been diagnosed, and people on there are really friendly, and the main message that you get from that is that you are going to be okay, and life will go back to some sort of new normal, and you are going to get through to the other side of this, because obviously, as you know, when you first get that news, it literally feels like your world's fallen down, and you just need to know it's going to be okay. And so you've got that, and then there's a really, really good group on Facebook, but that's purely to do with rights at school. There's a woman who's amazing, Danny Quinn, who advises people on school-related things. So you've got that. So that's sort of a Facebooky type thing, but that's literally it. And then in terms of local peer support, so Lucy's hospital, they did start doing some social events, and Lucy did a couple of those, and she really enjoyed it. I mean, we were supposed to be going to see, I don't know, something at the Hippodrome, and she'd chosen to go to that over this theatre treat that we'd booked for her, because she just really liked that connection. And I think, like you're saying, just to have that, like Mags was saying, that connection of just like you're all together and it's not a big deal and everyone's in the same boat, and it just makes you feel like it's okay. There's other people in the same situation as you are, and it makes you feel a bit more normal. So she really appreciates those connections, but they're really infrequent. They sort of are quite sporadic, and when they do them, she always goes, even though she hasn't really met anyone her age at those. But yeah, that's sort of, we don't really have anything. And then as the only thing I've got really as a parent is there's another child that was diagnosed at Lucy's new school, in her secondary school, the year below her, and the teacher said, look, there is, because like literally they are the only two in the whole of obviously in the secondary school, and they'd said, would they mind if this mum connected with me? I mean, obviously there's no guarantee you're going to have anything in common other than this, which is obviously what Lucy's finding a little bit at these social things, but she enjoys being there. So I have that relationship, and it's really nice actually, because she literally is the next village along, and I think we've both added value to each other in different ways, if that makes sense. And and she's always known, I mean, like one time, it's a bit like in our house, so I always do the pod change because Lucy can't do it herself yet, and my husband always does the Dexcom. That's just what we do, that's the routine. So obviously they've got a similar thing in their house.
The shorter straw.
I know, I don't know, yeah, well, it's more frequent than one, isn't it, the pod? But so her husband was away, and she was like, I know what I'm doing with the Dexcom, but I've just never pressed the button down. Like I've never pressed, just pressing it down to actually put it onto the skin. So the both of us were there, and obviously I don't do Dexcom either. In the end, I just phoned my husband and said, look, neither of us want to press the button, so you're gonna have to come and do it, because that's your. So then he drove over and literally just pressed it and then went back. So I mean, it was good that we've got that in each other, but you can picture the scene.
I did Joe's first Libra. I remember when he came over, and I had a spare Libra. I'd just moved on to Dexcom, and I had a spare Libra, and said to him, you stick this on, and he that's the same. It was the shaking hands.
It's to press the button. No one wants to press that button.
Yeah.
And
so in the end,
sound it makes more.
Give it and clicked it, and then that was it. So,
but I mean, that in itself, it is a big deal, isn't it? I'm someone that I would describe myself as a needle phobe. I am. And to then just suddenly say, well, now you've got to do all this, and it's things like, but with her as well. So Lucy doesn't. We always put some Emla cream on Lucy, because she doesn't, just to numb the area a bit. And it's things like that I didn't know that you could do, but on these forums, like, well, you could try this, you could try that. And actually, we've always done that now. She always has this Emla cream, and then you're just passing on that. You can try it, you don't have to do it, but this is what we do, and everyone's got their own way. It's all really so individual about what you do, what your child wants, and all that stuff. But yeah, in terms of that peer support, I would say it's quite poor. I don't think you have to really seek it out. And I think we went on holiday a couple of years ago, last year, to Ibiza, and there was a whole family there in front of us on the lounges and stuff, and literally there was 3 of the children and the dad had a pod and the Dexcom. And of course, when you're on holiday, me and Adam are literally like, when we see that, we're like, well, they've got a Dexcom, or they've got a Libra, with children in particular. And this one girl was similar age to Lucy, and she had got the pod that Lucy's got now. And I was dying to speak to them, but I thought, and then they were walking back, and I bumped into them, and I just said, oh, and they'd already spotted that Lucy got a Dexcom on, and I said, look, she's really wanting to do the Omnipod, but she's a bit scared of what that looks like and how it's going to work for her. And this mum and daughter, so the dad had got type 1, and then 3 of the children had got type 1, and she said, well, let me go and speak to Lucy. We'll go and speak to her. So Lucy was literally like side-eyeing me by the time I got back, as if to go, what have you done? And then this woman, I will never forget it. She was like, right, let's go back. We'll go to our room. She said, she's going to change her pod so you can see. You can help her do it. So she sat with Lucy. She didn't need to change her pod. She literally just done it. She took it all off. She showed Lucy how it works, what to do, put it on. Not a big deal. And I'm not joking. Just from doing that, literally when we got home, she's like, I want to give the pump a try. And that is the power of peers and that connection that I wish that if she maybe had that a little bit closer to home, or been in that environment a bit more, might have been a bit more open-minded to it. But that is all it took, that one person taking that time, who's of her age. And I mean, it makes me feel emotional talking about it, actually, because that I will never ever forget how kind. They didn't need to do that. That girl didn't need to do that. And then it was life-changing for us and Lucy. So like, we haven't got it, but I would like her to have more of it. But the network isn't in place where we are anyway, I would say.
I think I would imagine that, you know, Madeline, our daughter's 20 now, but I can still remember, you know, the joining secondary school and the big step up. You know, they're in year 7 and 8, they're trying to find their place as it is with their peers, and which friendship groups, you know, they want to be in. And you know, I know Madeline became a bit of a chameleon, depending to change as to what friendship group she was in, and that's without being type 1. And the thing that is, you know, girls in particular can be, anyone who's got anything different, they can be really quite, you know, unpleasant. And you'd think that she can't possibly be the only one, you know, at school or even in, you know, your wider community. And for her to know that there are others, just and to the care that parent gave, you know, it's that's very different from hearing something from a medical professional or even you as a mother.
Yeah, exactly. And I would always, you know, I would love for Lucy to have more connection of that type. I think it would really benefit her to have that, but I don't know sort of how to seek it out, I suppose. I mean, I've done all the things I can on like nationally, like Facebook and stuff like that, but we sort of rely a lot, I suppose we've sort of relied a lot on the team, our medical team, for their social side, and at one point it was fairly consistent, but it's not now, and it is a real shame.
The Diabetes UK have Together type 1, and that's a community for 11 to 25-year-olds. And the reason why I know that is that last year, when I attended Diabetes UK, they had the Together type 1 team there. There was about 20-25 young people, and such amazing advocates, and you know, and they do a whole load of stuff up and down the country. And so maybe I've sent you the link, Victoria. Have a look at that. I mean, maybe something to run past, you know, Lucy and see, you know, see if she's interested in maybe just registering or not necessarily going. But again, it's like it's toes in water, isn't it?
Just planting that seed.
Yeah.
This might be a good segue, Tom, like to play maybe Ian's recording, because Kirsty's brother Ian works for Diabetes UK and is deeply involved in the Type 1 Together crew, and it is that age group, like Victoria, and we have Type 1 Together over here in Northern Ireland that started with Our Lives, Our Voices, and I've met Kirsty's brother Ian over here with the work that he has just been involved with because of his family connection, and it's phenomenal. actually. So like I would 100% look into it. And and she'll dip her toe in. There's lots of girls. There's more girls than boys. I know that our Johnny would I was going to say struggle. He doesn't struggle with that because I think that he has peer support in his own house. He doesn't feel that he necessarily needs it. But when he does meet others that have type 1, he talks to them as if and uses language. Not He doesn't say it's peer support. He would show people his pump and talk about it in a way that a bit like what you said that family did. And there were, like, I remember at a hospital social that we had, that we didn't realize there was a guy in upper six that had type 1, and he was on pens, and Johnny was there showing him his pump and showing him, like, telling him how useful it is, basically how independent it helps him to be within school, where he could bolus in the line in the canteen without having to like leave it and all those things. And this friend of this guy in upper sixth was then able to reciprocate and tell Johnny that he went on the skiing trip and had no trouble and had a ball and that he should go. And it was like,
and it is those little things and those connections that just it just normalizes it a bit more, and you're not on your own.
Yeah. From Ian Kirsty's brother here, because he's not able to make it tonight, and I did a recording with him a couple of days ago, and it's really insightful, but really important for siblings of ourselves that have type 1 who have grown up around us, and our children too that don't have type 1 as well. What do you think then, Tom? Tom disappeared. Can I play it from here, I wonder? I know. This is where your sensor falls off.
Yeah, I know. Together Type 1 is like Ian's baby. He is the, let me see if I can remember his job title. He's like the Type 1 support manager or something like that. He's got like a fancy big job. And he loves it. He puts like his heart and soul and his all into it. And he's got a great team that work with him, all the young leaders and the youth workers and stuff. They're all fantastic. And I've met some of the kids that do the Together Type 1, and when you see them, like I'll meet them once and then I'll meet them a year later. They're like different people. And when you see them at events and they're all walking about in their blue hoodies, they're like a little gang. I love it.
And they're so empowered, Kirsty, aren't they? Like
yeah.
and they're like I think they help each other find the words for what they actually need. Like
Yeah.
and they wouldn't have had it before.
No, it's like a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the confidence as well. Obviously, last year at Diabetes UK, to stand up in front of 200 or 300 people in a room and show your passion and you it was incredible. I mean, we had a workshop session with them at the D.Dot Voices, and it was just so much, so much love and joy in the room. It was just to incredible young people. And I look back at then and think, God, at your age, I couldn't tie my own shoelaces, but you're able to do these amazing things. So incredible. It's just,
I'm just with Johnny, like when we were at a hospital event, and there was like maybe 20 of them in the room, and they were all, of course, they'd been forced to talk, all being stimulated to talk, and I remember Johnny saying something that like that I have an issue with, like, and when I forget to put my carbs in or to bolus, and you could just see the whole kind of temperature in the room dropping, and it's something that I think doesn't necessarily happen in hospital arranged, so like peer groups where everybody thinks that everybody else is doing better than they are, so they shouldn't talk about their faults or anything like that. But with the likes of peer support together type 1, everybody knows that everybody's just trying their best, and I could see that with Johnny in the hospital group. Once he said that it was like he does this thing that isn't what like clinic want to do, like that everybody else then was okay to chat normally. But before that, like all the other ones before that was all a bit stiffer, and having something that's not attached to hospital, Victoria is unique and lovely. How are you doing, Tom, with that? Okay. Okay. Ian, thank you so much for joining us. Can you tell us a bit about your background and your connection to diabetes, and what brings you here today?
Yeah, thank you, Mary, and thank you for having me here. I'm very excited to chat about this. So, I'm Ian. I am 31, live in Glasgow, and I have an older sister with type 1, Kirsty. She was diagnosed at 18 months old, and I then came along 6 months later. So I was born into a family with diabetes in the family. And I now currently work for Diabetes UK as their Type 1 Services Programme Manager. So I work with our youth programme, our Together Type 1 programme, that works with young people aged 11 to 25 with Type 1. So I'm working in Type 1 and have a personal connection to it.
Excellent. So what was it like growing up then with type 1? Like, you didn't know any different, but how did it feel different in your family? Like, were there elements that were specific to you or other family members?
Yeah, so I always find this question very interesting because I was born into a family with diabetes in the family, and I've never known any different. So I didn't really realize or recognize that my family was any different until I really went to school and started going over to like friends' houses and started to kind of go and have dinner at a friend's house. And I remember really distinctly. So back then, this is going back 31 years. Well, yeah, probably about between 30 and 25 years ago would probably be this time. But I went over to a friend's house for dinner, and back then Kirsty, my sister, was on set injections per day and had to be at set times. So then very regimented. So then meal times had to be at set times as well, and had to eat a certain amount and had to have the dinner exactly on the table at 5 p.m. so that we could eat. Went over to a friend's house when I was about 5 years old, and their mum said to me, "Oh, so dinner's not quite ready yet, so we'll probably eat, you know, about 5:45, 6 o'clock." And I went into full panic. I didn't understand how dinner didn't have to be on the table at 5 p.m. And that was when I started to notice and realize that there was something different about my family as opposed to my friends and
Did you actually
other
panic?
families. I had a panic. Yeah, I had a real kind of panic and a bit of a fear of
Yeah,
what is happening here and why is this not so regimented.
yeah,
um and I remember, so my friend's mum was a nurse, so she and she fully understood diabetes and fully understood like kind of that regime that people might be on. And I think she had a little word with my mum and dad after that to say Ian had a bit of a panic, bit of a wobble, and didn't quite know what was going on. And then that was when I started to get included a little bit in like knowing what diabetes was and being aware of what it was, and um, being
do you
kind of
think that
explained.
affected you, like in your life, like like that type of lifestyle without the context? Is do you think having that experience helped reshape that it could be different? It could have been different, or like the I'm just thinking about your anxiety levels. Just
Yeah,
as I'm thinking of my own family now. Like, does
yeah.
it
No, I mean
add to?
definitely. I know that. So I've had I've struggled quite a bit over the years with anxiety and kind of poor mental health. And I think that there are elements of it that probably is attached
Yeah.
to that kind of. I kind of describe my family in the most loving way of being chaotic loving. So it was
Hmm.
absolute chaos as a child. I felt that chaos. I knew that chaos was happening, but it was
I can
such a
so
loving
relate.
environment. And it's so I know that the adult I am now, the 31-year-old that's working in diabetes, that's supporting people living with diabetes and their families, I can relate a lot to that 8-year-old that comes up at an event and says, "Oh, my sister has diabetes, and if this doesn't happen, then all hell breaks loose." And I can relate to that because I was that little child, I was that little boy. Um, and I think it has shaped me into the adult that I am, and it shaped me into kind of how I handle maybe stressful situations and how I respond to them, both in really positive ways and probably quite negative ways. I'm
Yeah.
great in an emergency. I'm great
Yeah.
in an emergency situation, but I also have that underlying anxiety of stuff might go wrong here, something might go
Preventative
bad.
stuff, like you're like backups for backups everywhere.
Yes, totally, totally.
And like, did I'm just thinking, like, our next question was like, did you feel involved in Kirsty's care, or more on the sidelines? I'm just wondering, did involving you in her care help you, or hinder you, or like
Well,
did it?
it totally helped me. It really did help me. So, kind of following that experience of panic of realizing that there was something
Yeah.
different. My mum and dad and sort of wider support system did start to speak to me a lot about diabetes and involve me a lot. And I remember, so we went along to a family support group when we were younger and got a lot of support from that. And then my mum and dad went on to lead that group and to provide support for other people. And I remember that was a real game changer at, at being in those spaces and hearing what else was happening and hearing how other families and siblings dealt with things. But also, I remember my mum and dad started to talk to me at quite a young age about what to do if there was an emergency. So if Kirsty was to hit the floor and have a hypo and pass out, I knew what to do. I knew we had the old glucagon injections in the orange boxes in the fridge, drawn up that
Do you know how to
syringe,
do
and
that?
then I knew how to do that because we practiced. We took ones that were out of
How
date
to do it?
and drew them up and practiced on oranges,
Yeah.
just to make sure that I knew what to do. And I think I'd never had to use it in an actual emergency situation, but we've came close to it, and I've always known that I could, and I've always known how to, and that made me feel so much calmer at knowing, okay, if something did happen, if something were to go wrong, I would know how to support in that moment, and then how to make that phone call as well to 999 if needed. And I knew that from quite a young age, but for me that really helped me. For my older brother, so we also have an older brother who's 2 years
Yeah.
older than Kirsty and 4 years older than I am. he was diagnosed with autism when we were younger as well. So he's got a very different relationship to diabetes than I have. I was a lot
How is
more
that?
involved.
How is that then? Like, how have you perceived his relationship to diabetes in the family compared to yours?
Yeah, so I was a lot more involved in that kind of care and involved in the support. And I'd like me and Kirsty are best of friends and always have been since a very young age. So I've always wanted to be there and always wanted to be around to support and to help where I can and I knew that there was a role for me to do that. My brother had an awareness of diabetes, knew what to do if there was an emergency, didn't really get involved in that day-to-day things and sort of pay attention to some of the day-to-day things because he was dealing with some of his own health
Yep.
issues and some of his own experiences at school and quite tough.
Yep.
So there was quite a challenge there.
I'm
But yeah,
imagining your parents and like you talking about like your family, and I'm just imagining your mum and dad managing all of this.
I mean, they're fantastic. They're absolutely fantastic. And I knew that where I could support is in helping them quite a lot and being that voice of reason sometimes. Or
Yeah.
I was the youngest, but I took on a little bit more responsibility sometimes and did do and step up a little bit, but I was really happy to do so. And
Yeah.
that's family step up for each other. And as I've got older, I've had my own health issues and my family have stepped up and supported me. So we all
I don't know, it just creates an ecosystem, doesn't it, of like of
absolutely,
vulnerability. Everybody's allowed to be vulnerable, not trying to be tough things.
yeah.
Um,
But
and I mean,
I think having a sibling with a health condition, it definitely brought us closer together as a family. And it drew like some of the challenges that we might have faced were really tough, and some of the things that happened were really tough and scary times and emergency situations. But at the end of the day, having that love and care and support and awareness of what was going on for everybody, we spoke about everything. There was
yeah,
nothing that was a secret because it
yeah.
couldn't be. It was all open and honest and there. And we had a great childhood, but a chaotic childhood. So I've coined that phrase of chaotic love. That was what my family
I
was
love
like.
that. I'm gonna remember this from this conversation because it does resonate in my own family. I know we're getting on, and there's other people. But see, with your work with DUK, how how has that changed your perspective to do your job? Like having that background, then.
So it's made me really, really passionate in driving forward that full family support. I know how important that is. I know how important it was for me as a child, being aware of what support was out there and knowing where we as a family could get support and how I could speak to. Like, I went along to residential weekends and spoke to diabetes specialist nurses about diabetes when I was 5 years old and learn about it from them and got that knowledge. And I know how important that is and how important it is to find your tribe, whoever that is. So I still have siblings, like friends that I met when I was younger at these events that I still speak to today. I still reach out if something's going on and we chat and we get that support from each other. And going into that professional role with Diabetes UK, it just makes it keeps that in the forefront of my mind, and I can be that voice when there might not be that voice in that room and can just bring that
Or
in.
there
So
just isn't that voice in the
yeah,
room, and that voice is so important to be like reminded about. And I'm so glad that you're in the job that you're in, Ian, even more so now, hearing why, because it's so common sense
yeah,
and logical. Thank you so much, like
you're very welcome.
for for that and for sharing about your family. Yeah, that was Ian, and I think I spent half the conversation half in tears too, Kirsty, if I'm very honest. Like we're very fortunate here in our house, like where I was diagnosed when I was 18, um and Johnny wasn't super tiny like you were. Um and we manage it we're lucky here because I think how we were diagnosed was very randomly and very slowly and caught very early, both of us. We haven't been through any shocking times that other families have, and chatting with Ian and knowing that it's more of a norm for families who have no experience of type 1 diabetes to have a shocking introduction to us, and it just made me really aware of that, and I'm really grateful for chatting to Ian about it. And afterwards I had a chat with our daughter Sophie too, and it had been quite a while since we'd been talking about what you would do if so we got our glucogen pen out, and I went through it again with her, and but she didn't know, because she didn't know, but she does now. So I'm not sure how Tony, do we need to do any more tonight? Like, will we round it up maybe with maybe something positive from different
I guess
perspectives?
so. It's just obviously the most important thing is to thank everybody who's contributed, the stories and insights and your honesty. It's just made so much difference. It helps us, move forward, creating a stronger, more compassionate group of people. It's your roles are just as important as our condition, and your support. Obviously, all of your support from families and spouses and parents. It's just, and brother and sisters. It's just, really. I'm glad we've had this chance to kind of get the other side of the coin from us as type 1s. We very often it's stuff that we haven't thought about over the years, and because we've had our condition and it's been hugely enlightening for me. I don't know, you probably for you as well, Mary and Tom as well, and thanks to Mags and Sheila and Victoria and obviously you, Mary, and Ian as well. It's just been such a special night. Thank you all.